Alone at last. Hi, my name is Ben. Nice to meet you all. You've all written your names down, so I'm going to write my name down. My pronouns are he, him, his. And everything that Nida just told you is absolutely true. I know it sounded a little boxed and a little like a script, which I think it is, but I love GA. It's an amazing place. What I would emphasize from everything she said is that this is absolutely a community of people. I've taught here for many years. I've gotten a lot of work through here, so the proof is in the pudding. I've had 2 full-time jobs in the past 4 years. Both of them I landed here at GA. So what's great about GA is that it's a place people come to learn and get better at something new. So the people coming in here and passing through here, there's just a lot going on. It's like a train station of Boston's tech economy almost. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot of fascinating people here. So I really encourage you to jump in and participate as much as you can. I look forward to learning about your own goals with the class and how this class and GA in general can accomplish them. Sound good? So, welcome to Visual Design. Today we're going to orientate ourselves, get to know each other and the course and all the tools we're going to be using in the course, and we're going to dip into Figma a little bit. This is my first time ever teaching with Figma, so bear with me, but it seems really easy to use. It's a clone of Sketch, which is a program that I know extremely well. The industry is at a point now where they are, I don't know if they were totally transitioning to Figma, but there's a lot of talk about Figma. Everyone, every design team I know is they've formed an exploratory committee to see if Figma might be right for them. And what I love about it is it's basically like Sketch and Google Docs had a baby. So it's like Sketch, but you and your other team members can all work in it simultaneously and see what the others are doing. So perfect for collaboration. Very excited about it. As I said, my name is Ben Spear. I am your instructor. Today is Tuesday, September 24th. Is everybody excited?
Ooh, yeah.
So our agenda today, we're going to learn about me, I'm going to learn about you. We already learned about GA. We're going to explore this course a little bit and just cover all the basics and any questions that you have. I'm going to give you a high level on design. I've been a designer for a very long time, and so I have lots of thoughts about it. And I'm just going to give you some stuff to get your mind geared up for just design and jumping into it. Some sort of broad rules. Those are things that I will be referencing back over the various lessons in this class. And then we're going to do a little Figma intro. I'll give you some quick slides on here's what it looks like and how it works, and then we can pull out our computers if we have time and start signing up for it and getting connected and getting ourselves all sorted out. That is all part of your homework as well, so if you don't get to it in class, you'll get to it before Thursday. So, learning objectives today: get to know each other, get oriented with the class, any key dates, deliverables, what is your work going to be like in this class? We'll go over that very briefly, as well as Figma, how it fits into a modern design workflow, and then how to use it to create a simple landing page mock-up, etc. First and foremost, who are we? Who am I? So I've been designing for a very long time. I got my BFA, like a lot of designers did, back in the 90s. I know I don't look that old. I actually turned 40 this year. Very excited. I know. Going to Mexico. Got my BFA in graphic design. I could complain a lot about art school, but there's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff. I was trained as a print designer, which is the bad part. And so after I graduated, I had to teach myself a lot of how design actually works in the real world, right? Like digital design, and digital workflows, and working with engineers. The web was not fully crazy at that point, but it was crazy enough that I knew I needed to learn that stuff. There's been a lot of my career approaching digital workflows and digital design. I did some, as I mentioned, print design right out of college. I got into branding, very fascinated by what makes an organization them and not someone else, and how do we express that visually. We're going to talk a lot about it in this class. And then I got into startup branding because I just am obsessed with the future. Something you'll learn about me. I'm like a sci-fi dork. And so I was like, yeah, startups, I want to go check that out. And that's when I really crashed into digital design and workflows. Startups need everything now or yesterday. They have no time to learn about design or how it works. They just need you to produce stuff. And so jumping into that environment, I learned a lot about just how it all works. led me to be a UX lead. So this is really where I transitioned into UX and user interface design. So I led UX at a small startup. They made a vegan meal planning app. It was very exciting. Then I was design director at HubSpot, which is a tech company here in Boston. He was crazy there. I was just having coffee with another former HubSpotter downstairs before this, and we both were just like, it's crazy there. But I was able to support a team of 6 designers there, and it was really, really gratifying. Today I am teaching, advising, and coaching. So I'm teaching here, all of you, which I'm very passionate about. I also advise startups on how to do design better, and I coach designers directly. So I have one-to-one relationships with designers. I coach them on how to be better designers. And that's me. Any questions about all of this? No? Not gonna let you off the hook that easy.
Any print that we would know?
No print that you would know. So HubSpot was great for my career because it's like a brand name.
Yeah.
And before that I had only worked for small businesses and startups. So it was all just like little stuff, which is great, but also like there's no visibility to it, which is the downside. Yeah. Anything else? All right, I want to get to know you. So thank you for writing your names. We'll go around the room. Tell us your name. Tell us why you're taking the class. And then who's your favorite designer if you have one? And why? And I may jot down some notes because I like to revisit your reason for taking this class at various points in the class. Would you like to start? Rupa?
Sure, yes. I'm Rupa. Hi, everyone. I'm taking this class because I actually don't have any background in visual design. My background is in public health. And so as part of my work experience, my team has just started to explore design thinking, like the process we're doing that for all the projects. And as part of that work, we have to create like nice, pretty PowerPoint decks, even do a little low-value prototyping. And so for all, and my counterpart, who I work with, she's actually just naturally very good at visualizing things and making things look really pretty. So I thought, it would be good for me to also get exposure to this. And my sister actually herself, so she always was into art and just naturally knows what colors go together and like how everything fits. So I feel like, people around me know this stuff. I should probably also tap into it and like know how it works. And also I hope that it will make my work move a little faster at work and not struggling so much trying to figure out how to visualize data and content when we're doing presentations. In terms of favorite designer, I don't know, I guess my sister.
Why?
I really look up to her and she's, she has a good eye for things, so yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Rupa. Jen?
My name is Jennifer. Why I'm taking this class? I studied graphic design 10 years ago, but then I studied another career, marketing, and because I was attracted about how to create strategies, how to achieve objects, and then how to, like, if you have a composition and design, how to articulate that. But the years passed, and then I realized that I don't know, like I really like spending time designing and behind the computer instead of talking and then being in front of people. I don't like that. I get really nervous, like right now. And the other thing is that I was working creating logos and then print and promotional material, but I want to get knowledge in web design and to upgrade my knowledge and experience about that. There's a reason why I'm taking this class. I don't have a favorite designer. I think that everyone has a different things. What I like, when I see something and if I like it, I start following that person or just like taking that person in, I don't know how to say that, but to following that person. But if I like another thing and then I follow the other person, I don't get attached with people or with a design, because I think that the design always evolves and there's always something new that you can learn from others. What I like is a design that is minimalist, like a clear design, lines, and really like white, and that's all for now.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
Hey, I'm Mac. I use they them pronouns. And I studied creative writing in college and started teaching myself how to draw like a year and a half ago. And I've made a couple like logos and posters for friends and podcasts and stuff. And I know that my strengths right now are more in like making comics, but I want to be working with design, and I know that like working with my hands and like visualizing ideas is what makes me really happy, and working in retail doesn't make me super happy, so I know that I need some more like groundwork
Yeah.
to like take some steps into a career in design, and so
Great.
that's why I'm here. And I don't think I'm a favorite designer, but I think a lot of my inspiration comes from comics that I read, and I really love work from Image Comics, and Brian came on, who does a bunch of sci-fi stories. Yeah.
Are you also a sci-fi person? Thank you. Anya?
Hi everyone. I took a class with Aaron Scott, a UX class.
Oh, great.
And part of the class very briefly talked about visual design, and I just really wanted to learn more, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity. I'm a math teacher, and I'm very interested in what math education will be in 10, 20 years, and a lot of it is getting to become digital very slowly. Education sphere is 20 years behind. And so part of the UX class was designing an app for children. And it was a great class. I recommend it to everyone. But I also realized that visual design is not my strength, and I really want to learn more and hopefully improve the app
Yeah, that's very great.
I was working on.
The last visual design class that I taught, also a UX designer who had studied here at GA, wanted to come in and do the exact same thing, so you're not alone. And I know Aaron Scott, he and I have co-instructed UX classes here. He's amazing. He's awesome. Who's your favorite designer?
So I don't know much about design, but I stumbled into furniture because I had to furnish a house for Airbnb. And so I looked at mid-century and I stumbled into Frank Lloyd Wright, and I really liked his things, but I cannot say that that also I realized how important it is to think about color combinations, color theory, and I tried to read about it and realized that I need more structured approach.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to learn more here.
Great. Yeah. Frank Lloyd Wright. Maybe not the best person in the world, from what I've heard.
I haven't met him.
Yeah. He like maybe killed his wife.
Really?
Yeah, she like burned to death. She burned to death, I think, in a house fire. And it's like he may have started it. It's all very vague. Don't quote me. I could be misremembering the facts. But I think like a lot of creative geniuses, he was difficult.
I like murder.
Maybe. Let me back you on that. I don't want to be spreading lies about somebody, but suffice it to say, I think he was.
Can I switch? I know that there's a mid-century a mid-century house by right here in Massachusetts by Walter Gropius.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I really like his house. And
Yeah.
I hope he didn't.
No, he's a murderer too. No, just kidding. Gabby.
I'm Gabby. I'm taking this class because my background in college, I studied mechanical engineering, and the position I'm in allowed me to kind of transition into UX. So currently, I work in UX and do a lot of UI, icon design, specs and stuff, but I kind of learned that on my own. So I really wanted to just start like learn it in a more formal way rather than just on my own. So just like developing the design side of my skills. I guess that's pretty much it. And for favorite designer, I immediately thought of Christian Siriano, who is a fashion designer, and I like him. I watched him when he competed on Project Runway.
Same.
And fun fact, my boyfriend actually met him in Atlanta, Georgia when he was doing an event. And they took a picture together to make me jealous, and I was really jealous. But I really like him because he's super inclusive, and his designs are just really amazing.
He's got the gift,
Yes.
for sure. His final runway show was the
Yes.
best project runway of all time.
Oh,
It's just
yeah.
completely stunning. Lots of black feathers.
Yes.
And reserves. Allie?
Hi, I'm Allie, and I'm taking this class. I think this, even back when I was a kid, I was coming up with the name of some company I was going to start one day and sketching the logo, and then went to college, studied economics, and ended up working in tech here in Boston after a few other things. But was at a startup where any design, I was working in customer success, and I still am, and any design that I needed, we never had bandwidth for. So I was left to my own devices, and I would be putting together my own decks and promotional images for things like webinars or anything that might be coming up. And I became the default person where someone would say, "Hey, can I borrow that deck and revise it a little bit," which was a cool compliment. And it wasn't until recently where I was creating something because the designers didn't have any time for me. And I had one of the designers on my team at my company look at what I did, and she said, how did you make this? This is really great. And I made it in Keynote. And she said, have you ever thought about design? I said, no, I don't have time for that. I have a job, I have a 2-year-old, forget it. And then finally I saw that this course was coming out, and I figured it's a good opportunity to get some, to really learn the foundations and not work in Keynote, and hopefully be able to, expand upon that.
Excellent. Any favorite designer?
That's a good question. I feel like I'll have more favorite designers that I'll think of later as soon as I go home. But the first that came to mind was fashion designer, I guess, for fashion brand Everlane.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love I love the brand and what they're about. But I also love their minimalism and how they are just creating clothing for, it's not about the tall, curvy, whatever. It's pure clothes that normal people wear and that are comfortable and are made economically and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
everyone.
Karen?
I'm Kara. I can relate to a lot of what you guys are saying about being always kind of having that pull towards art and design. I am a communications specialist right now at Home Goods in TJX. So I work in the store operations umbrella. So a lot of what I do is communicate out to stores, what's coming and when, and try to make our communications very visual. And I can relate to what you're saying with lack of bandwidth. So for our store managers conference, the creative team isn't available, so I'm the one that's creating the signs for the team, and kind of the PowerPoint go-to person. And I think I've always been drawn to it, so that's why people come to me, because I've been interested and would make the effort to teach myself that stuff. But since I work in the store and retail environment, I do work with marketing production, so a little bit familiar with print, more the logistics side of it, creating install guides for stores on how to put it together and install it, when it's coming, and different things like that. So I'm ultimately looking to make a career change. Do not have a favorite designer at the moment.
You can just say anything.
Yeah.
And we have one student, thank you, Karen. We have one student who's not able to make it tonight. Her name is Anne. She had an appendectomy recently, and she messaged me on Slack to say that she's not feeling coming in. Myself had an appendectomy many years ago. It's painful. empathize. Hopefully, she'll be able to join us on Thursday. Pour one out for Anne. Nida mentioned different forms of feedback that you'll be giving to myself and the General Assembly. So, skipping down a little bit, those are exit tickets at the end of every class. And there's a single link that's pinned into Slack. It's also going to be, did a little link shortening. It's at the end of every deck. So there'll be time at the end of class to fill out exit tickets. There's mid-course feedback and there's end-of-course feedback. And those are like 15-minute surveys that you'll take sitting right here, where you give us your feedback and thoughts about how the course is going, about myself, about General Assembly. I also hold office hours before class from 6 to 6:30. We can change those times if it doesn't work for anybody, but I have found teaching this course in this time slot in the past that tends to be easiest. I don't think anybody really wants to do after class because it's kind of cutting into Netflix time at that point. Everyone wants to get out of here. But if anyone can't get here by 6, I'm super flexible. I'm self-employed, so my schedule's really flexible. You can book me anytime. We can book space here in conference rooms. We can do Slack sessions, works. We can do Zoom. If anyone's used Zoom video conferencing tool. Anything that works for you, I am available at any point during the week. So just reach out and let me know on that. So I'm out on vacation. As I mentioned, I'm turning 40. I'm going to go to Mexico for 2 weeks, a week and a half. I'm out on vacation for the 7th, the 12th, and the 14th. Those are to be our 3 last classes. So those are the classes where you will be in the final throes of preparing your final presentation on the 7th, and then the 12th and the 14th are the final presentations themselves. So I'm wondering if it's possible for us to extend the course to 11/26, which basically means that you would have these 3 dates, the week and a half, to continue working on your stuff. I have found that extra time is always a benefit when it comes to the end of the course, because this in a bit, but design is about iteration and sort of like trying a bunch of stuff and failing and then finding what's right. So we give you some extra time, but I know that when you signed up for this class, you probably planned on it being over by 11/14, and so if anyone has anything going on after that and we can't extend the course, we'll just figure out something else. So I want to put that on everyone's radar. We don't need to make the decision tonight, but I would like to know relatively soon so that whatever solution we end up with, I can begin providing for it. Does anyone know right off the bat that that would work for them? Anya?
Is that Thanksgiving?
It's the 28th.
I'm afraid we might be.
Okay.
Yes, but if we extend it after.
After Thanksgiving? Okay. Let me just take
I
a second
don't
look.
know, I'm sorry, I don't know. It just,
That's gonna be a Tuesday.
did you say?
Yeah, that's a Tuesday.
26th is a Tuesday, and Thanksgiving is on that Thursday. So if anyone's planning on traveling for Thanksgiving starting that Tuesday, then that would be problematic. We could bump that final class out to Tuesday the 3rd of December also, if that works for folks. We can work this all out on Slack and make sure that everyone can sort of like check their schedule and we can be kind of thorough about it. No need to make a rash decision. But like I said, we'll find some way to handle it. And I will hit class up on Slack then. So it's sounding like Tuesday the 26th is maybe not a safe one to put. Anya, you're gone.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm gone too.
Gone too. Okay. All right. So I'll work out something else. Probably extend to the 3rd if that's cool with everyone. The road to success. This is real. You will experience it if anyone has gone through a course before. Anya, maybe you have seen this when you took UX. GA loves to put this up because it's very true. As you go through the class, you will waver between being very optimistic and very pessimistic, and this is a natural cycle of change when you're learning something new. So in the beginning, you have what was called uninformed optimism, right? You don't know how hard the challenges are going to be because they haven't really been laid in front of you yet. And so it's natural to feel very excited and very capable and very sure you're going to do a great job at this point, and you should feel that way because you will. On the other side, you will get to a point of informed optimism. You will have seen the challenges, addressed them, mastered them, emerged victorious. But in between now and then, it's not unnatural to experience this sort of trough of despair, and I go through this on every project that I take on. It's a very natural cycle. It's the point in the project, or the course in this case, where everything just feels overwhelming. You're very aware of all the stuff you don't know and haven't mastered yet, and you're aware of how hard it's going to be to climb out of that, right? And to just muscle through and master the stuff that's challenging you, but it will happen. And so I put this up just so that you all know that if you feel this way at any point in the class, sometimes it comes early, sometimes it comes later, to just take a deep breath. It's natural. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a normal part of learning, and I'm here to help in any and every way. Every project, I get to a point where in the middle of it, I'm like, I made the wrong career decision, I'm not talented, I'm probably a bad person, it's like, it just all gets so overwhelming and you feel so bogged down, and it's tough. Long walks help. I'm gonna just briefly talk about your course project. In short, you're doing a single web page for your client. So we have 3 client briefs that we'll provide to you, or you can take on a personal project. Students in the past have done about half and half, either or. If you take on a personal project, you will be responsible for creating the brief for that project. Every project needs a creative brief. As I said, for the ones that we're providing, those briefs are already written. You still need to do some critical thinking about those briefs, but that's it in short. And then optionally to design additional artifacts, deliverables for that client. So whatever you determine the user of that product might need, if it's an email blast, social media graphics, business cards, get crazy about it, and that stuff is optional. But the thing you need to deliver at the end is a single web page that accomplishes the goals that you've set forth, and then also to describe the process of how you got there. Design is a process, it's not just a product, and so it's going to be important for you to express the thinking that you did, whatever research, and all of that will be assigned to you class by class, lesson by lesson. Every lesson that you take will help you build towards that final project. It's a single project class. Questions about the final project? What thoughts? Okay, yes.
Are we limited to just Figma, or can we use like other?
You can use other programs, yeah. So it's not uncommon to use Illustrator and Photoshop. Those would be the 2 big ones. There are After Effects you could use if you want to do anything in motion. But we don't teach those tools here because they're really complicated. Teaching those tools takes forever. Adobe products were designed before UX was a thing. If anyone has used them, you know what I'm talking about. They're highly technical and they're very difficult to teach. It is possible to work in Figma and not have to use those programs. How do you do it? You steal. So contrary to popular belief, design is really just stealing and remixing. So some designers are illustrators. Some designers do motion graphics. Some designers design typefaces. But the one thing that all those designers have in common is they're able to take all that different stuff and put it together. So design is about choosing the right typeface, the right illustration, the right photograph, and putting it together in a way that works. So you can use Figma, and since you're not publishing this work to make money off of, you can use someone else's illustrations that you find on their portfolio site. You can use photography that you find somewhere on the web. You can use typefaces that are really gorgeous and fancy. You don't have to pay for them. In the real world, you have to pay for all that because you're using it to go out and make money. But here, you can be like a remixer without limits and pull all that stuff in. All that stuff is made in Photoshop and Illustrator. Right? If someone's a photographer, they're working in Photoshop or Lightroom to make those photos gorgeous. They're doing illustrations in Illustrator or by hand. If you have these skills to support yourself, like Mac, you sound like you could probably put together some illustrations, comic book art kind of stuff, do it. That's great. That's a value add, but it's not necessary. So that's why we don't teach Illustrator and Photoshop here. We're not expecting you to author anything in those programs. Figma is a place for it all to come together and be formatted and prototyped. questions or thoughts about Photoshop, Illustrator, programs in general?
Can you use Figma in Windows?
You can use Figma in Windows. So this is one of the reasons that I really like Figma and why I think it's really appealing. Sketch is only available for Macs. I don't know. Really weird, right? Figma is not only available for Windows machines and Macs, but you can use it in a browser. There's a full-fledged browser version that you just go to the Figma website, log in, and it's a full-featured, it's like Sketch, but it lives in a browser. Highly scalable, highly adaptive, anyone can use it anywhere. I like it a lot. I believe in it, I think it's the future. Other questions? Thank you, Rupa, that's a great question. Also, Figma has a freemium tier. So Sketch is $100 a year. Figma, if you only have 3 projects and no more, something like that, you can use it for free forever. And I think for the purposes of each student in this class, that will be enough. And you don't have to pay for it. And I think if you do pay for it, it's $12 a month or something. So it's an approachable price point. Yeah, just add that to the list of things I like about it. One of my students in the last visual design cohort used it because he was a PC user, and it worked great. What is design? So I'm going to, just a quick time check, 7:30. So I'm gonna just give you a brief overview of what I know about design as a career field. These are sort of like key concepts that I will come back to over and over again. I start out with a wonderful quote from the wonderful Paula Scher. She's one of my design heroes. She's one of the founding members of Pentagram in New York City. She says that the job of a designer is to make things understandable, usable, accessible, enjoyable. Notice she said nothing about beauty. There's actually a great quote about that. I won't spoil it. I'll wait till we get to it. Understandable. Right? So the first job of a designer is to make sure that our users, and I do look at visual design through a user experience lens, that our users, the people who are experiencing the design, understand it, that it makes sense to them, right? What makes sense to us may not make sense to them, and vice versa. So there's a heavy research component, research and discovery on the front end. It's the first thing we're going to learn about on Thursday. Who's our audience? Where do they live? What do they value? What's their experience like? Once we know them completely, we can take advantage of that. All design is manipulation. I'm a little bit of a cynic there. We can leverage their lived experience to change their behavior, right? To get them to do something, to get them to think in a certain way. It may have to do with beauty, it may not. Beauty is inconsequential. Thoughts? Okay. As a designer, you have to think about what in the world do you want to change? Can you see okay? What in the world do you want to change? As I mentioned in the last slide, design is manipulation. We're getting people to do something they wouldn't otherwise do. If you make a website or a poster or an email blast, and your user looks at it and says, "That's gorgeous," and does nothing, you've got no job. That's not a job. That's art, which is cool. Art and design intersect, but they're not the same thing. Art is where you make work to express yourself, and there's not much of a closed loop. It doesn't really matter if people like it or don't like it. I mean, I guess if you want to be a highly successful artist and rich and famous, then it does matter. But I would warrant that person's actually more of a designer because they're sending their work out for testing and they want to make sure that it makes them money. As a working designer, you have to change people's behavior and measure that change. I'll give you an example. I did a branding project recently over the summer, and the goal of the branding project was to change the way people thought about the category, which was cannabis. It's a cannabis startup. And I worked with a client early in the project to say, what do you want people to think about your company? Tell me in words what they should think and what they should feel, and we got that nailed down and determined. And then once the branding was done, we did the logo and all the other stuff, we put it in front of people and we figured out if they actually thought that. So it's not about what he thinks is beautiful, it's not about what I think is beautiful, it's not even about what the customer thinks is beautiful, it's about, have we changed their mind? That's what's real. And in order to do this, we have to get outside of our own heads a little bit. We all have a personal aesthetic. I tend to be a Nordic Scandinavian minimalist, right? That's what my house looks like. That's not what my design looks like. My design looks like what the customers need it to look like, right? And I have to step outside my comfort zone to do that. Stakeholders are hugely important. There's always going to be somebody paying you, and their opinion matters. What do they need from the work? So my client that I mentioned over the summer, he needed people to think differently about cannabis, right? I have to anchor my work to what he thinks. We don't have clients in the classroom. You can count me as your stakeholder. I'm sort of playing client role, so it's important what I think. It just is. I mean, or you can be like, I don't care what you think. I'm here to do this and that, and that's cool. That's your goal. But you know, I'm grading you and stuff. So if you're into that, my opinion as a stakeholder matters. Who are your users? Where do they live? As I mentioned, where do they live? What do they think? What is their world like? It should be familiar for a person who's taking UX design. And what do they need to see? In order to change their behavior and think differently, what are the things you need to show them? Right? And then show them those things. If you want to scare someone, we've got a pretty good idea of what to show them, right? Blood and gore and guts, or some sort of taboo subject matter that we, don't often see. If they need to feel peaceful, we know what to show them. Or do we? Terror and peace mean different things in different cultures, right? So our work is also about removing bias. I come from a specific culture, doesn't mean that my customers come from the same culture. I have to get outside my own self, remove my biases, and really implant myself in their world, and what they think and what they feel. But it all starts with what you want to change about the world. You end up taking a job, getting paid for design, I can guarantee you your boss is going to ask you to change customers' behavior with your work. You got to be cool with that. If you're cool working for a bomb company, go work for a bomb company. But if you're not, you can't just take that job, because you're literally going to be building communications materials that make people cool with bombs. And you might be cool with that. I'm not here to dictate morals or morality. I'm just saying, think a little bit about the impact you want to have on the world. It's the kind of like, with great power comes great responsibility thing. You all heard from Spider-Man? It's kind of that. Design is more powerful than you might think. Postmodernism is a crazy word that gets tossed around a lot, and it can be hard to wrap your head around. It was very difficult for me to really wrap my head around it when I first started thinking about it, but it is the backbone of contemporary design practice. We all live in a media-rich culture. Does anyone know what I mean by that? What makes our culture media-rich?
Different ways we can be.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like 100 years ago? Was there TV? Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. So there was like radio and newspaper. There were fractionally fewer ways to, as Kara said, absorb media. All that changed. For whatever reason, our society today is media rich. Phones, TVs, the internet, a zillion podcasts made by a zillion people, right? Twitter, social media. It's like the media communications are on steroids at this point. So that creates a bubble bath. Millions of little bubbles, and each of those bubbles is a meme, a photo, an image, an historical artifact, a piece of information. And we live in this all the time. Postmodernism, which is where design is today, takes advantage of the fact that within a given culture, everybody has a shared experience. People in Western culture have all experienced horror films for the past few decades, right? I grew up with Nightmare on Elm Street, there was Scream, we have a long history of horror films. Dozens, hundreds, probably thousands or millions of horror films, and they all have a similar look and feel, right? That's because once a few of them started to get this feel, it became easy for designers, that's you, to say, oh, all I need to do is make a poster with, who can describe the visual commonalities here?
Villain? The villain or the...
Yeah, there's a central villainous character, right? What other visual qualities are at work here? What's that?
There's like one main focus.
Dark with one main focus. Mac, you had something?
Oh, darkness.
Yeah,
Shadows.
darkness, yeah. Shadows, darkness. Jen?
Typography.
Typography, the
Yeah. Typography, very harsh, sort of like spooky typography. The Halloween font has been reused for Stranger Things, or a similar font's been used for Stranger Things. So there's a bucket of visual qualities, right? That if you get assigned to make a horror poster, all you need to do is go to that bucket and fish out a few things, employ them on your poster, and voila, you have now tapped into a shared experience that your audience has. And they don't even need to read the poster, they don't need to see the trailer. All they have to do is glance at it and they know right away that it's a horror movie. Think about how much information you are able to communicate in such a short amount of time by leveraging these past shared experiences, right? That is postmodernism. Good or bad, it puts media and media communication on like hyperspeed rails. We know just by scanning our world, there are these semantic cues, these signposts that they're visual on the surface, but they point to deeper meanings. Chalk drawings in the hall. Why chalk? Have you ever thought about it? Why chalk drawings in the hall and not photographs or impressionist paintings? Why chalk?
Old school, 100-year old school.
Old school, right? Do we use chalk anymore? Maybe, sometimes. Not in these classrooms though. We use dry erase, so why didn't they draw them in dry erase? Association with an older time. General Assembly is a new type of school, right? It's only 10 years old. Conjuring up this old school educational motif grounds the school. It's cheating. It borrows from our shared experience to give us an historical foundation and ground us in a more well-rooted educational paradigm. Even though we don't believe in that, we don't use it, we don't like it, we prefer for our classrooms to be more participatory, the curriculum changes much more rapidly than it ever did in those environments. But we're borrowing, right, that shared experience to give people who walk the halls a certain impression. All design functions this way. All design. Every piece of it. That is how design works. It is the backbone of design. And so when I say that Figma is an ideal tool because you can just borrow and grab and remix, that's what you're doing. You're borrowing motifs that signal meaning and you're putting them together to create new meaning. Questions about this? It's an overwhelmingly complicated concept, but once you see it, you don't unsee it. It's everywhere. Anya?
So, I'd like to ask specifically about typography. There are many websites where you can see different fonts, but sometimes I'm an immigrant, so I don't have the same associations, but there are no tags on this font. So how would someone not familiar with this culture know that, for example, Halloween font is associated with scary movies? For me, this is not, unfortunately, obvious. Is there, like, tags or any sort of...
So my advice to you would be, you'd have to just do a lot of research, to figure out where that font comes from, where it originates, there's always going to be a story there. All fonts have a story behind them. But it kind of proves the point that our associations are culturally embedded, right? Our experience of design is largely culturally embedded. And in order to reach both yourself and a person from the US, I would need to step up above both your cultural context and the US cultural context and look at a broader global cultural context and look for what I could draw there. What can be drawn that is shared, which as the world becomes more and more global, we do have a lot of shared contexts now. There was a movement called modernism, okay, before postmodernism, that's why they named it that, which sought to solve that problem by leaving behind all cultural context. Also known as Swiss modernism or the international style, for obvious reasons. This school of thought believed that we should not decorate things, we should not have any fancy typography, we should only have one typeface, Helvetica. That's where Helvetica comes from. Helvetica was designed to do this job and do this job only. And that we would strip away all consumerist, inflated, decorative artifice. Right? That now has been subsumed into postmodernism. So modernism itself is now a style that we can reference that points to a specific time in our history and set of values. But the dream is still alive and well. It's kind of socialist, right? If you went into the supermarket and everything was in Helvetica, that's not a consumerist supermarket, right? That's a Soviet supermarket, which I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's not where our cultural context is today. Part of your ongoing homework for the entire course is to continually collect design artifacts. A lot of what we're going to do is cultivate your ability to perceive these references and then, of course, to leverage them. Design is a critical act, right? You can't just walk through the hall and be like, oh, cool, what's her name? I forget, Julia Child? Mm-hmm. Oh, cool, Julia Child, awesome. When you're a designer, and it gets kind of annoying because it's like the voice in your head you can never turn off, you will walk through the world and say, chalk, okay. I guess they have an insecurity about, how well rooted their educational paradigms are. Oh, wow, okay, GA guess, that's a thin, heavy, grotesque. So that was a design trend from 2006. I guess they got caught up in that. You are in a constant state of judgment and criticality. You're thinking critically about all the design decisions that were made by all the designers living and working out there today. It's kind of fun. It can also be kind of annoying. Sometimes I wish I lived in a Helvetica world so that I could just shut it all off. This is my design collection, just a piece of it. So I keep all of my design inspiration in a single folder. Anything that I see that either inspires me, moves me, makes me curious, or maybe there's just something about it I don't know what I like, but it caught my eye. I take a snapshot of it, either with my camera or I screenshot it or whatever, and I dump it all into this big pile. And then when I go to design stuff, and I've established what I need to communicate to my audience, I'll then go to this collection and be like, the thing I need to communicate to that audience, have I seen it anywhere? It also just strengthens the muscle of looking, right? I'm always looking, I'm always judging. I'm always sort of weaving a bit of a narrative. You see design trends. One of my close friends lives in Truro, Massachusetts on Cape Cod, and her local dump has a free store. You can go in and everything there is free. It's a dump. She found this beautiful little book about Cape Cod National Seashore from, I think, the 70s. And it's got this gorgeous, swashy, call that a swash, whoosh, in typography. I think it's custom, I don't know. And then I went into a vegan eatery on my block last week and saw that same swash. Look, the N has those two, and the A has those two with this teardrop terminal, right? And so it's like I'm seeing these trends. What's the commonality here? What are both designers trying to express? Anybody? What are both designers trying to express?
Whimsical, carefree in a way.
Yeah.
Movement.
Huh? Movement. Yeah, movement, absolutely. All right. Cape Cod National Seashore. It's kind of windswept here, right? It kind of gives you a sense of breezy, easy breeziness. So there's some aesthetic qualities, but enough people have used this style that it now just is a stand-in for easy breezy. It could be written just random letters in gibberish and I would still get that vibe, right? That it has this carefree quality, a little vintage, a little retro. And so I did some investigating and found a couple fonts that somewhat closely match it, but ultimately I think this is just a custom job. I think this is someone actually just hand lettered it. I don't think it's a font you can really get. Scrubby approximates it. It's a free font that was made recently. Cloister Squash kind of. But this is what design is about. Constantly looking and being critical. You're in a constant state of critique. And in fact, we're going to be critiquing our own work as part of our course time here together. We're all going to get to know each other very well. You're going to be weighing in on each other's work, providing feedback on how it feels to you, and whether you feel that it's hitting the cultural targets that were set forth by the designer.
So did you ask somebody
I
to take
did.
a picture of her?
And then I instantly was like, it's because there's a book, and I was like, I'm not just taking a picture of your chest, I promise. She was kind of like, okay. But yeah, I instantly whipped this out. I was like, see, it's because I'm a designer and I'm just a dork. But I'm taking pictures of stuff all the time, and I'm screenshotting a lot on the web too. You know, there's a lot flying in front of your face all day, and there's a lot to screenshot. As I mentioned before, design is not about making beauty. What you see as beauty in a design emerges from decisions that the designer made about you. So what we don't understand is that we are often the subject of a design. So I'm going through my day, I see something that I think is really beautiful and cool, like that t-shirt, right? What I need to know is that I was identified as the target audience by that designer long before they created the design. A bunch of people sat down in a boardroom, looked at some demographic information, and decided that I have enough disposable income, or people like me, to buy a t-shirt like that. And that it aligns with my values, and I'm the target demographic, and then from there they went and chose a typeface that would appeal to me. By the time that typeface and t-shirt get to me, and this is our power as designers, I don't see the boardroom, I don't see the demographic profiling, I just feel relaxed, right? Because a whole host of calculations were made to make me feel that way. And that is how design sneaks in under the radar. That is how we broadcast our pirate signal, to quote the Matrix. That's how we work. That's how we accomplish what we do. And so, at the beginning of this course, we're going to do some research and discovery about our target audience, some competitive analysis. We're going to do a lot of fact finding. We don't start drawing. We don't start choosing typefaces or colors. We start by understanding who we're designing for. It is from there, those decisions, that color, typography, everything else must emerge. And you know a good designer when you see someone who has in their portfolio two completely different styles, each one tailored for the target audience, right? It's not the case that a successful designer has a trademark style. That's more like art or illustration, but a great designer is able to adapt and design for any population. And wrap their head around their cultural context and cultural cues, and then leverage those to make them do something, right? They wanted to make me buy that t-shirt. I might buy that t-shirt. I think it's cool. But it wasn't by accident that I saw it and was like, cool, you know? It's also important, as it is with every field today, but I can only speak to design, when we talk about decolonizing design, and the role of colonialism in design. We talked about cultural contexts. Western culture has had a dominating force on the world in general. And so when we look at the kind of culture that we're putting out into the world, we have to also be conscious that just because some visual cues are rooted in Western culture doesn't mean that they are the default, doesn't mean that they are superior or anything like that. This is a new topic. I think it's been on my radar for like a few years, but you don't hear it talked about super robustly, and I think it's important to include it as part of our conversation. I am a white person from America. I'm a white guy from America. I have to be aware of those biases when I design, right? I have to check those biases as I work. Otherwise, those biases will leach into the cultural context of the work that I create and propagate further bias, which is unjust. And so as part of my process of researching the folks that I'm designing for, I have to be super sensitive to their realities and to the fact that, again, as I talked about before, they are not me. I am not them. I also have to be respectful that I don't exploit underserved or underprivileged populations in the work that I do. I talked about design being manipulative. You can't manipulate people in a way that is unjustly exploitative. So you can't trick people into taking on a home loan that you know they can't afford. You will be asked to do things like that as a designer, right? It's all about the bottom line. It's up to you to say no. A designer could do that, but I as a designer will not do that. And again, I'm not here to dictate morality. All I want is for you to be aware of it. That's it. Aware of it and asking the question of yourselves. Where's my line? What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? You want to go design bombs for Raytheon? I support you, honestly. It's not for me to say what you should and shouldn't do. But there is a moral context to design, quite naturally. I covered this, mostly. Yeah. Which brings us to taste. Very difficult thing to teach, very difficult thing to learn. Taste is appropriateness, the ability to discern what is good quality when measured against generally held views of what's offensive or acceptable. When something is in poor taste, it offends people. They find it offensive. Sometimes you want to do something in poor taste because it makes an impact, right? Like a horror movie, right? Like it's not tasteful to hack up an elderly person and spread their parts across the front lawn, but it certainly accomplishes the job of a horror film, right? So if you're cool with that, great, but I don't know that it's in good taste. Here's an illustration of good taste and bad taste, right? It changes over time. This wasn't in poor taste in 1986, at least for the group of people who designed it. The world changed, thankfully. We gained a broader cultural context and realized that it is in poor taste and that this is in good taste. So design is very much locked in this conversation, right? So it could be argued that this is postmodern in a way, right? It's drawing on a shared cultural impression, but that shared cultural impression is unjust. So we have to be careful about what we draw on. Questions about this? Or thoughts? Yeah.
Would you say that, because tastes may change over time, would you say that it also evolves with cultures?
Yeah. Taste and culture are linked. So as culture evolves, taste also changes. I'm not sure that anyone stood up in 1986 and told this designer, hey, don't do that, because that designer maybe didn't have access to people who would say that, right? Culturally, they were isolated. And so whether we can hold this against the designer who did this, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Really depends on the context of how and when it was created and what kind of awareness, if any, was brought to the designer. Hey, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe this isn't right. Certainly today, we can look at it and say, it doesn't work. That does not work for our society today. We know that, right? So it changes. The more expansive your cultural awareness, the better equipped you're going to be to not do this, right? This is why we go through robust research and discovery at the front end of our project, right? We can't just be like, oh, I know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm going to sit down and design it this way. Da-da. It's not about that. You're only going to be able to work from your small cultural postage stamp of where you live and how you are, and what your world is like. That's why we step out of ourselves to do research and discover, okay, who are these folks? What are their realities, right? What's normal for them? What's not? What's acceptable? What's not? How can I do this in a way that plays to the better angels of their culture, my culture, the world? It's a good thing. So, enough of the heavy stuff. Let's dive into Figma. Much later. I don't want to cut that discussion short. It's important. I want to be conscious of time, but does anybody have anything to add? As I mentioned, I'm a white dude, so my ability to speak to these concepts is intrinsically limited, and I welcome perspective of anybody else at any point. Yes, Anya.
Wondering, do you find that designers in general, because they are aware, perhaps more of their biases in general population, do you find that they're less polarizing in their opinions and view the world as more relative rather than black and white?
I think so. I think because of Julia Child out there, designers know that there's a strong cultural context to everything, and so as part of our work, we have to be critical of these contexts, and that just naturally opens us up to this reality that, like, yeah, culture is completely relative. And my perspective is always going to be relative to my cultural context. I was raised middle class in the Northeast, to a liberal family. I'll always see things from that perspective, just in the same way that a mother of four living on the West Coast might see things from her perspective, and if I'm designing for her, I have to understand her. Does that make sense? I think designers are better equipped at this because it's part of our job. We have to do it if we want to do a good job. If I ever say or do anything that is inappropriate to anybody, I invite you to tell me. Please tell me. That's not a stressful thing for me. It's something that I welcome. I certainly don't want to saddle anybody with additional work in that regard, but I also want to make this classroom be a super safe place.
Just in general, how do you work on developing that muscle to be critical and judging things around you?
Yeah, it's any guesses? Yeah? How do you develop that muscle of being critical, seeing the world around you, forming opinions about it? Someone we haven't heard from. Gabby?
I think something that helps me in my own work is to seek out criticism from other people. Because then you start to notice things that you initially don't notice. So that helps you pay attention to things that other people might pay attention to.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Seek out criticism from other people, right? Actively. When I worked at HubSpot, the culture there is very feedback focused. So everybody is looking for feedback all the time. It creates a real openness, which I appreciated. In this class, we'll be doing critique, which is a core part of design. Those are sessions where we will all sit around, probably in a circle or semicircle, and one person will put their work up and say, here's where my work is at. Here's what's challenging me on it right now. Here's where I think I could improve. What do you all think? And then one by one, each student will say, well, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should look at it this way, just like Gabby is saying. Maybe you should think about it in this different way, and that gives the designer this, right, we're leveraging the power, the group's power of criticality to inform our own design. That is why we do critique. 8 heads are better than 1. Yes?
Do you find that particular blogs or books have influenced someone else's critique of objects or thoughts have helped you to develop a better team? And if so, what are the resources that you would recommend that we look at?
I have in our shared Google Drive is an additional resources sheet, which it's got a few items in it already, so that's a good starting point. I think really anything that you can read about design is going to help you see it from different perspectives. So Paula Scher was up there a few minutes ago. Her book Make It Bigger, which came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, was very inspirational to me. It helped me to see design from a much higher level than I was at the time. There is a website called Decolonizing Design that has been really influential to me lately, and there's a group behind that behind that website, which writes articles, and so I started following all the Twitter accounts of people who are involved with that group, so that's been a real eye-opener for me. Nothing else really comes to mind. Yeah, I think it's just immersing yourself as much as you can. Oh, there was another book that really opened my eyes was, it's unfortunately written from a somewhat patriarchal perspective, so it's called Design for the Real World. And I don't think, again, going back to Design for the Real World, going back to like taste and time, the author keeps saying, he does this thing where he's like, any good designer would want to do blah, blah, blah. In his work, it's sort of like default masculinity that makes the book difficult to read. But the core message is that every designer has to take full responsibility for their work and for what they create in the world. And so that book was really influential to me in terms of criticizing my own work and what I do and why. If that makes any sense. We'll keep a running list. Does anybody have any resources that they turn to now for design criticism or thinking about design objectively? All right, we'll keep a good list. And there's that additional resources, Google Doc, I will add to that as we go.
Can
Yes.
I ask a broader question of just visual inspiration?
Visual inspiration.
Or in
The world. Yeah, so I really, that photograph of that poor woman's chest is just one example of like, I go through the world taking pictures of everything and making mental notes of everything. I really do. That's all I got for it. Yeah, even like slippery when wet caution signs, like I'll take pictures of that. Everything like that has usable visual vocabulary. So slippery when wet, that's a certain typeface. It's black letters on a yellow background, right? If you put black letters on a yellow background, it ends up looking like a caution sign. That's usable. You can use that to get someone's attention, right? So I just take pictures of a bunch of stuff. Usually typography. Type is a very powerful way to do this, which we'll get into in that lesson.
When you consume like pictures and stuff, do you sort it at all, or is it just one open bucket?
We sorted a little bit. I actually put everything in my photos library. I'm a big Apple person, surprise, surprise. And I have like a tagging system there. So everything is tagged with design, and then I might tag it or label it afterwards. Figma. So we've got about 20-25 minutes left, which should be enough time to cover the basics. I've already talked about it a little bit. It's about 4 years old. It was built by a 23-year-old. Can you believe that? Yeah. Like one of these built it in his garage, and now it's got like $8 billion in funding. It's a Sketch clone. So Sketch came along 10 years ago and totally snatched Photoshop's wig. You heard that expression? Snatched someone's wig. It just took Photoshop, everyone's using Photoshop to design websites, which is a nightmare. I literally lost my mind trying to design a website in Photoshop. And I cringe that this course is advertised as having Photoshop as the primary tool. So then Sketch came along, and it's literally 100 times easier to use than Photoshop. So it was everybody was so excited to have Sketch. And I was like, yeah, Sketch, you show those bastards. Sketch was the hot new kid on the block. And then now Figma has done the same thing to Sketch. As I mentioned, it's got a free tier, very easy to use, can be used on Windows machines. It's emerging. It's not the tool for web design today. That's still Sketch because it's the legacy systems in place. So a lot of design systems that are in place in companies were built in Sketch. So it's hard to make the transition. There's a switching cost. But people who are starting anew today are starting with Figma. It has a lot of collaboration functionality. This is what differentiates it from Sketch. So if you think about Microsoft Word and Google Docs, very similar core functionality in terms of word processing, but Google Docs has that robust commenting, collaboration, multiple people can be in the document at the same time. You can use it from any web browser. It has an app that you can download for macOS, app you can download for Windows, or you can just use it in a browser if that's your bag. It's a little slower in the browser, obviously, for obvious reasons, but you can do it if you like.
Is Figma kind of replacing InVision with the collaboration piece?
Yeah, so both Figma and Sketch are trying to pull that away from InVision. So the age-old duo was that you would build your screens in Sketch, upload them to InVision, which is a website, and then you use InVision to prototype them together. You make the buttons clickable so that a person could actually go through the experience, and it's very useful for testing and things like that. Both Sketch and Figma they're clawing that functionality back into their own apps. So both Sketch and Figma have what they call prototyping functionality right in the app now, where you can link your screens together and run a prototype right from inside those apps. So everyone's clawing for everyone's business.
Is it comparable to quality to InVision for Figma?
I would say no. I would say it's about 65% functionality. So you may still want to use InVision. They've had a long time to perfect their tool set. And there's a freemium tier, which we love. Yeah, so I'm going to go through the interface really quickly, just its component parts. I won't spend too much time on this. You seem like a savvy group. You've probably used some similar tools in the past. These are the main areas, and I'm going to break them down one by one. The canvas, the artboard, objects on the artboard, the inspector, the toolbar, and then the pages and layers pane. So the canvas is this gray area. It goes on forever. It's an infinite canvas. You can zoom out and zoom out and zoom out until everything on there is a tiny little postage stamp. It's where you put artboards. And actually, I have to fix this because Sketch calls them artboards, and probably because of copywriting, Figma calls them frames. So you put frames on the canvas. These are frames, these white squares with stuff on them. Frames can vary in size. These are mobile-sized frames. You can notice that they're long because their web pages scroll, so we just draw them very long strips. And as I mentioned, the canvas is infinite. Bordered by rulers. These come in handy when you want to measure how big objects are, or how far apart they need to be, or how many pixels wide or tall your frame needs to be. Questions about the canvas? Rulers? We'll get to frames in a bit. Frames! So frames contain stuff. They contain graphics. All the stuff you're going to pull in and put into your composition, like graphics, photos, illustrations, typography. You can create text boxes and type in them, and all of that lives inside the frame. The frame can be any size, depending on the target device, which you established earlier in your workflow. Don't worry, we'll get to that. These are mobile-sized frames. It has an editable name, so there's a name at the top of the frame. You can name that. Usually you name it with the size of the device, mobile, and then whatever's going on in that frame. Dinner view. This is a file from when I was leading design at that vegan startup. This is all yummy vegan food. It's listed in your layers pane, which we'll get to in a bit, as the top level layer. So this frame is also represented here, and then all of this stuff underneath represents all the objects on the frame. you export your frames as flat images, like JPEGs, which you can then upload to InVision to turn into a prototype or send to your client for review or do whatever you would like. Questions about frames? Okay. Objects are things that go on frames. So they usually live on an artboard, and again, that should be framed. They usually live on an artboard, but an object could live out here on the canvas too. It just would be an object with no home. Maybe you just need to leave it there for a little while you do some other stuff. Again, they can be shapes, lines, text, photos. This is the stuff. This is the stuff of your design, right? It's the imagery, the typography. When you select different objects, it changes the inspector. So if you select a text box, you're going to get a bunch of options here for typeface, type size, type color. But if you select a photo, you're going to get a different set of inspector options. And that's what the inspector is. Anybody watch Inspector Gadget as a kid? I'm probably all too young. Inspector Gadget. Anybody? I always think about that when I say inspector. Objects on your artboards are nested into groups and subgroups for easier management. I have a touch of the OCD, and so I always have my objects in folders and labeled appropriately, so you can really go crazy here, making sure that your objects are neatly organized. They can be locked, so there's an option. If you mouse over here, you'll get a little lock symbol, and you hit that and it will lock the object, which means you can't move it. It can be useful sometimes when you've got too much going on and you just need to lock some stuff down. You can also hide objects. You can say, you know what, I don't want to see this object right now, or you can hide whole folders which contain multiple objects. So it's an easy way to make certain things disappear, make your workflow easier. The order that they live in here reflects the order that they get piled on top of each other in here. So if something is higher up in this list, it is on top of everything else. So you can control layering, which is a key way of composing graphics in any program. Photoshop, Illustrator, Sketch, Figma, all use this idea of layering, right? So it's a two-dimensional screen, but we work in layers. It's like, I've got this piece of paper, and then I want to put this thing on top of it, but then if you reorder these things in the layers pane, you can actually just make it go like that, right? You can control layer order, and that impacts the visibility of certain objects that may be sharing space. The inspector, as I mentioned, shows available options for the objects that you select. It's contextual, so you're selecting different objects. Gives you different options in the inspector. And it allows for actions that aren't always possible via the mouse or keyboard. So a lot of the stuff that's in the inspector could be available from the menu up top or through a key command, but it's easiest through a little GUI, a little graphical user interface here, to act on the objects. Toolbar up top, similar to the inspector, but it has higher level functionality. So up here we've got create an artboard, insert a certain type of object, insert a type box. You can also rename your file. There's sharing functionality and a view zoom. So it's sort of higher order ways to control the entire app. And then, as I mentioned, inside your in this pane, you see pages, layers, and assets. So, just to further complicate things, every file has multiple pages. Each page has its own canvas. And I'll do a little test drive of this so you can visualize it. So up top, you have your pages listed. You also can toggle over to assets, which is items that are like symbols that you want to reuse again and again. Don't worry about that too much right now. It's sort of advanced. And then down below we have, as I mentioned, our frames and the objects inside those frames. As I mentioned, layer order. You order of these layers determines visibility, and that layers can be organized into folders and subgroups. Hierarchically speaking, because I do have a little of the OCD, we can think about the Figma ecosystem from broad to narrow, starting with team, because we do have a lot of collaborative functionality. So I have created a team and invited you all to it. That team is called Visual Design. Within the team, we can have multiple projects. Each of you will have a project inside the team. Inside your project, you will have a document, right? A Figma file. Inside that document, you're going to have multiple pages. Each page has its own canvas. Each canvas has multiple frames. Each frame has multiple layers, which could contain folders, which then contain objects. And when you select those objects, you get options in your inspector. So that is the super broad to the super narrow. So this is the sort of collaborative team building screen. Doesn't look like much. I do think they need to work on the UI a little bit, but team is GA Visual Design. The project, there's none yet, but there will be once you all start making projects. Within the project, you have a document. That document contains pages, which in turn contain a canvas and multiple frames, each of which has layers, which are organized into folders. Folders contain objects, and when you select an object, you get contextual options from the inspector, and sometimes a toolbar. Let's see it in action. So this is Figma. I have it running on my desktop. It's not the web browser version. As I mentioned, we are in a team called GA Visual Design. You've all been added. I haven't done a team yet in Figma, so bear with me if I need to work some things out, but I think we're going to be in good shape. You would then create a project. I'm going to call this test project. You can all edit it, right? So within this project, I now need to create a file. And you can see it brought me into the environment that we know and love. There's a bit of a lag. Just give it a second. There we go. Not a lot of stuff. Haven't made anything yet. Totally blank canvas, right? And you can see this is untitled. So I'm going to title this file. Within the project test, I'm just going to call it file 1. What's the first thing I might do in this file? Anybody? Create a frame. Yeah, exactly. Create a frame. Now, since they're smart, and they totally copied this from Sketch, by the way, they give you a bunch of presets. They're like, what kind of frame do you want to create? Do you want to create a desktop composition, which we don't. We always start mobile. We'll get into that later. And I like to start with an iPhone SE. It is the smallest phone on the market, reasonably speaking. I don't think anybody would have a smaller phone than an SE. And so I start there because it's the smallest. I like to start with the greatest constraint. So I hit it, and up pops my iPhone SE frame. We know that it's a frame because it's listed at the top level in my layers pane. It has a name, iPhone SE, which I can edit. And it has dimensions. Can anyone see how many pixels wide this is? It's tiny, I know. 320, yeah. And it gives me a default height of 568, which is about the size of a screen. I would leave the frame at this size if I were designing a native app that didn't scroll, right? So some apps just, you never have to scroll, everything happens on the screen. But if I were designing a web page that does scroll, I'd want this to be taller. So I might go in and just say, you know what, just to start, let's give myself 1400 pixels of height. That's a good place to start. And then I just go from there, right? Home page, if I could spell. And let's start creating some objects. Hello world. That's a piece of type. Pinch to zoom in. And because I've selected some type, my inspector has given me all these nifty type options, all these different ways that I can act on that type. Questions about the interface? Okay. So I'm gonna do some stuff, make it bigger, and now I'm gonna create a rectangle for this to live inside of. But what happens?
There are layers and the rectangle is above the type.
Absolutely.
Then you need to put it-
Yeah, I need to reorder those layers. What's a good way for me to do that?
You can go to the panel, the left panel, and move it down.
Yep. So I just go over here and I drag it below Hello World. And when I do, it changes the visibility structure, right? That rectangle is now underneath Hello World, and Hello World is now on top. We can generate a lot of cool effects using this layering functionality. Cool, that's all set. And I'm like, that's gonna be my, what we call a hero image, which goes at the top of the site. And so I'm gonna group those into a folder and call it hero. Inside that folder lives those two objects. I can turn down this arrow and there they are. Right? Hello world and the rectangle both living nicely inside that group. When I mouse over, I can hide them. I get a nifty little eye, blink, wink icon, hiding and showing each one. I can hide and show the whole group if I want to. I can lock the group, which means that if I go to move it, nothing happens. And that's the basic functionality of Figma. Questions? Thoughts? Are you super jazzed? If I want to bring stuff into Figma, like I was talking about, I mean, as wonderful, fascinating as this gray rectangle and black type are, it may not be enough to get the job done. So what I like to do, and I'm a big full screen person on a laptop, if you've got a Mac, I highly recommend it. I'm just gonna grab something from my desktop. Do I have any images? Yeah, sorry, it's gonna be my headshot. I can drag it and then just drop it right into my composition, and I get this blue outline, which shows me the borders of this photo. The photo itself has been included in my layers pane, and the object is labeled with the file name. And you can see that it's cropped to be only visible the portion that is on the frame. Everything that's falling outside the frame is not visible. If I move it off the frame entirely, it will become visible, right, if I just need it for later. Or I can shrink it down so that I see the whole thing. And as I move it around, they give me these really nifty little guides to help me line things up. And now we've got some design going, if you want to call it that. But that's the basic functionality of how a designer works, right? We're setting type, we're drawing some shapes maybe, and we're pulling in photos and illustrations from the outside world. We're cobbling them together into something that looks like something. Hopefully better than this. Thoughts or questions? Okay. It's all pretty straightforward, and you seem like a bright bunch, so I'm not worried. Your homework for Thursday, create a Figma account. Some of you may have already done that. I saw that you probably got the invites in your email, and you joined, so you're in the project group. Download the app and install it to your machine. Like I said, you can use it in a browser if you want to, but I think it's slow and laggy, so you're going to have better performance if you got it on your machine. Join the class Google Calendar and Google Drive folder. Those are pinned to our Slack channel. The calendar will function as an active syllabus. So there is a course syllabus also inside Google Drive. It's like a Google Doc, and it kind of gives you the breakdown of the course, but it doesn't include a lesson plan. because I like to keep that adaptive to the class itself. In the calendar, each event is labeled with what I'm pretty sure we're gonna work on during that time, but again, it may move around, and I make all of those changes in the Google Calendar. It is our single source of truth for what we're doing and when. It will also include homework assignments in the descriptions of each of those events. If you need stuff, go there. The class Google Drive folder will have all of these decks for you to review and any other important files that may come up during the class. The additional resources document is in there that has some of my design inspiration sites and things I like to do. The course syllabus is in there. All of your individual homework folders are in there. So there's a subfolder called homework, and then each of you have a folder inside of it. Each of you have write access to that folder. It means you can write files into it. So if there's anything you want to hand off or include as part of your homework assignment, you can dump it in there. And also inside each of those folders is my grading of your homework. No one else can see that. I have set permissions so that only you can see your grades, but that is where I will leave grades on all of the stuff that you turn in. So again, calendar, single source of truth for what we're doing and when. Google Drive folder, single source of truth for the stuff, any files, any stuff that we're using in this class. Start your inspiration library. This is required. This is a non-negotiable. I want to see at least 10 things by Thursday in your inspiration library, and that folder is also in your homework subfolder. So you may have a place that you like to keep it, like your photos library or wherever else, but I will need you to upload to that folder so that I can review and we can maybe discuss them in class. It's going to help you, trust me. There are 3 starter briefs provided by GA. Give those a read. There are 3 fictional startups. One is a juice bar, one is a healthcare provider, like an ACA. That's probably the hardest one you'll notice. It's kind of like the advanced one, it's called Aiden Health. The juice bar is called Liquid Labs, and then that and Beatbox, which is a playlist provider, Spotify-ish kind of thing. Those are the more approachable ones. So only do Aiden Health if you're really feeling like you want to go for it. Or, as I mentioned before, you can take on your own project work. People have done both in the past. Yeah.
Do you have any guidelines for creative, if you're doing your own project, creating a creative brief?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a whole class on creative briefs. So at that point in time, if you're doing your own project, that we will do that as part of your homework, and that will be additional for you.
Got it.
Yeah. So we break down creative briefs piece by piece. How to read them, what to take away. So give those 3 a read. It'll give you a sense of like, just if you do your own project, then it gives you a sense of the scope of what a project would be like. And if you want to do one of these briefs, you can pick one and have that ready for Thursday. And then there is a pre-work assignment on my GA called Creative Briefs and Mood Boards. It says it takes an hour, but it doesn't. It took me like 20 minutes, so don't be too afraid of it. It's pretty brief, and it will get you ready for our discussion in our next class. Questions about the homework? Okay, so the deck that I used today is attached to the Google Calendar event. You can access it there, or it is available inside Google Drive. It's also available there if you want to review it. And as I mentioned, as both I and Nida mentioned, at the end of every class we do an exit ticket. That gives me feedback on how well I'm doing in terms of instruction. So you give some number ratings, and then you also give me some qualitative feedback, what's working, what's not, any questions you still have after this class. And what happens there is, like, if most of the class has the same question coming out of this lesson, then I'll just address it in the next class. Or if it's an important question, but maybe you're the only person who has it, I will address it with you one-on-one in Slack. The goal is to make sure that you have all of your questions answered and all of your needs fulfilled. So please do be as honest as possible. And we do have you complete these in class. It's a Google form, so crack open your mobile device or your laptop, type this in, or you can click on this from within the Slack channel, and then should take about 5 minutes. We've got about that much time left in class. be designed by somebody.
Okay.
So you could take a picture of the GA logo on this bag, take a picture of Julia out there, take a picture of a street sign, you take a picture of a hood ornament. They just need to be designed objects. If they've got some relation, if you can look at them and we end up seeing some relation between them, that's cool, but not required. My
Okay.
goal here is just to get you in the habit of doing this.
Okay.
This is another interesting, I don't want to just review all, but like, it's a gear, right? It's not really a gear. It's like, it's a symbol of a gear, right? So it's signaling what?
The year's turn.
The gear's turning, yeah, right? Language that designers speak. Yeah, if you're good to go. Yeah, if you're good to go. It's been a real pleasure. There you go, meeting everybody. I'm so excited about the next 16 weeks. Anything else? Thank you all. See you on Thursday. You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
Thanks.
See you on Thursday.
I work with a lot of ex-HubSpotters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are many.
Yeah. So, you're talking about this, like,
It's a great place to work.
Yeah.
I would do it again.
I mean, everyone values their experience there, but
You come out of it and you're like,
there's a lot going on. Yeah,
Like,
definitely. Yeah.
a company with that kind of growth is just, the hiring apparatus alone is a sight to behold.
Right.
They all work.
Yeah. And just, being in MarTech and probably feeling like they have to have they're trying to create, they created this category of inbound, and they probably are trying to be leading with design as well.
Yeah.
After they're running really around this
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
So,
for sure it's real.
yeah. All right, well, thanks so much.
Great to
See
meet
you
you.
on Thursday.
I'll see you on Thursday.
He's currently evaluating right now.
Oh, you're cool. Yeah, because you're part of the UX team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My manager just went to a design summit, and last year they surveyed how many people use Figma. And this year it was like 75% of the companies, but last year it was half of that. So it's
Wow.
definitely
It's gaining momentum.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll probably happen pretty quick. It sounds like your company is ready to make the shift, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I took the design system from HubSpot when I was there at Canvas, which lives in this like gargantuan sketch file, and uploaded it to Figma because of course they have a conversion,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
upload, and it worked fine.
That's awesome.
So I was like,
That's good to know.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that was maybe like too easy.
Wow.
Poor sketch, you know.
It's really interesting though for my company because I work over an engineering software company, CAD, computer aided
Which
system,
company?
OnShape.
OnShape, okay.
It was created by the creators of SolidWorks.
Okay.
So they describe OnShape as like the Google Drive of CAD. So it's the same mindset as Figma. So
Bye, Ben.
Good night. See you on Thursday. All right.
So it's like the same
Similar shit as
ideology.
Figma, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Eliminating anytime you can take friction out of an approvals process is going to be a huge savings. So I think that's kind of the angle, right?
Have you ever used abstract?
I've never used abstract.
That's
No.
what we're using right now.
Yeah.
Sketching abstract.
For prototyping.
Good for version control.
Oh,
sharing.
that's right. Yeah. We looked into that when I was at HubSpot. We didn't end up going with it, but it looked really cool.
Yeah.
It's like it kind of creates like a GitHub layer on
Yes.
top of Sketch, right?
So you
For
branch
working
and
and versioning. Yeah. Be
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah. I wonder if Figma has anything similar for branching and merging.
Yeah, I feel like Figma would eliminate the need for branching and merging, so
Yeah.
it's more
Yeah,
streamlined.
because it's all just there.
Yeah.
Happening in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I look forward to talking more about that stuff.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, Gabby.
Quick question.
Yes, no problem.
So I use a laptop
Yeah.
that doesn't allow me to access anything Gmail related.
Oh, okay.
It's just work laptop. But I just wanna,
okay.
I use it every day, so I do have a MacBook at home, but
Okay.
I don't use it too much, and I probably will do project work for work anyway. So I'm
yeah.
thinking I'm going to use the Dell.
Okay.
The thing is, so I don't currently do too much on Google Docs, but I can access it on my phone. So can I do a lot of this stuff on my phone, or?
Yeah, let me think about that. I think you can actually. Okay. Yeah, I think you could. The only thing I would think about is you're going to need a way to turn in like homework assignments. Like Figma's not a problem because anything that you do, and I'm going to try to funnel all the homework assignments so that they can be completed inside Figma,
Okay.
which solves the problem, right?
Yeah.
So I think anything that's due that would be outside of Figma, and I don't know what that might be yet, you just need to email me,
Okay.
and then I'll keep it organized in Google Drive just because I'm a super organized person.
Okay.
So I'll keep your stuff organized on that end. But yeah, I think we should be okay. You're able to access Google Calendar?
I'm gonna test it tonight on my
Okay.
phone.
Yep.
It should be.
Should be fine. Yeah. And it's a pretty big screen, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you get Google Calendar and Google Drive going.